This is a Motorola E40, and this is my smartphone. It's my daily driver, and I absolutely love this thing. This thing has been my daily driver for quite a while now, and I have never been happier with any smartphone that I've ever had. Now, why am I talking about Motorola today? Why am I talking about my daily driver? Why did I put a case on it? Because I like the extra protection. I just wanted to show you guys what it looks like without the case on it. Why am I talking about this today? There's a very good reason as to why I'm talking about this very cheap smartphone, because I got this for like 130 euros over in the Netherlands, which I think would be the equivalent of about 140 bucks in American dollars. But why am I talking about this today? Well, because there's something that I've had in my mind for quite some time in regards to smartphone and tech in general, because there's a lot of people out there, and I know that this does not count for literally everybody, but a vast majority of people out there buy a smartphone based on the brand that they're from, or because many other people own it, or whatever. Stuff like Samsung, iPhone, OnePlus, and all of these other brands, these very big mainstream brands, right? They are all extremely popular, but they are also very, very expensive. Now, I know that a lot of these brands also have sub-brands or subcategories of smartphones that are much cheaper than their flagships. But if we're going to talk smartphones, I personally just, and especially these really big brands, the first thing that I think of are their very expensive flagships. There are companies like Samsung that have some subcategories of smartphones, like their A series, which is far cheaper than the Galaxy S series of smartphones, but I personally don't care too much about them, because a lot of those smartphones are still at minimum $300, from what I've seen at least. This thing cost like 130 bucks when I got it, and it has been one of the greatest devices that I've ever had. And to be clear, before I had this, I had an iPhone 8, which by the time that I used it, it was already a couple of years old. By that point, I got it refurbished, and it was a really good phone. But again, it was very expensive. And when you actually look at the price tag of a lot of flagship smartphones, because that's what it all comes down to me, you gotta ask yourself a couple of questions before you're actually going to get a smartphone. What do you want to get out of your smartphone? What are you going to use it for? What are your personal requirements? Do you need to use it for just work, or do you actually want to be productive with your smartphone? Do you want to make great photos? Do you want to do something else? Or do you literally only use it for occasionally watching YouTube videos, making phone calls, possibly chatting with people through WhatsApp, Telegram, or Discord, or something like that? And when you put all of that together, that's, I think, when you can decide what smartphone you truly need. Most people just blindly buy a Samsung anyway, because that's the big brand. That's the brand that everybody knows and everybody trusts for whatever reason. I say don't bother with any of that crap and just buy a phone based on your needs. Like for example, I really don't use my phone for all that much junk. I barely have any games on here, and quite literally, I can show you guys what I've got on here. I don't really have all that much, and literally the only game that I have on here is Circle. One of the simplest games to ever be played on any smart device. So I'm not going to bother with playing very many games, because I am frankly not interested in playing games on my phone of all devices. Like, if I wanted to play games on the go, I would just grab my DS or my Switch, or maybe even a Game Boy. If I ever decided to buy Game Boy games again, I would probably just get a Game Boy or a DS Lite for that instead, and I would never want to play any serious games on a device like this. Because, frankly, I think you look like a doofus playing games on your smartphone. But that's just my personal opinion. No offense to anybody who actually does play games on their phone. That's entirely up to you, obviously. But that's just not something that I personally would want to do. So, based on my personal needs, I just decided, you know what? I'm just gonna get the cheapest smartphone that I could find from a relatively good brand that I can actually trust. And Motorola was the very first brand that came to mind to me, because their phones are cheap and these things actually freaking work. Motorola also doesn't ship their smartphones with all that much garbage. I installed a bunch of garbage on it. And obviously there's all of the stuff that Google ships with their smartphones. Like, there's some Google apps on here, like Google Home, there's Gmail, there's obviously going to be Google Maps and all of that. And along with that, I personally just installed a bunch of apps that I personally really like to use. Telegram, Twitter, YouTube is obviously on here because that's a Google app. I also installed Disney Plus, Discord, and some other stuff that I like to have on my smartphone. But pretty much nothing that I have on my phone has anything to do with games or, I don't know, any other crap that I just don't need. And that is one thing that I noticed about a lot of these really big brands like Samsung, especially Samsung, who have been infamous. They have been notorious for installing their own bullshit on top of Google's already really good Android. And I don't mind companies building their own customized Android skin for their smartphones. I think it's great that Android can be heavily customized, and companies are taking advantage of that. That is one thing that Apple doesn't allow anyone to do. They don't really do much with customization on their smartphones. So to have a company like Samsung, OnePlus, and Xiaomi come in and build their own custom launchers for it and their own icon packs and everything, I think that's really cool. And I think that it should be encouraged. You know, I personally just end up installing my own launchers on my own smart devices because I think it's just a lot more fun to use my own launchers. My personal favorite is Niagara, in case you're wondering. But where I start to have problems is when companies start to bloat up smartphones with their own apps. Like Samsung has their own versions of their own all sorts of applications that Google already ships with their devices. Like Google has their own calendar, they have a mail app, they've got fitness, they've got their own drive, the OneDrive and Google Drive, and all of that stuff. Samsung, for whatever reason, ships all of that crap, but also their own versions of those apps. So you have two different calendars. You've got Microsoft applications bundled with Samsung devices, like OneDrive and Microsoft Office for whatever reason, on top of Google's own applications. And there's an awful lot of other crap that Samsung bundles with their smartphones. This is not something that I personally like, and this is not something that anyone likes. Nobody likes Samsung for doing this. Everybody just prefers smartphone companies to just ship a smartphone with just base Android apps, not their own bullshit. And so that's another thing why I really like Motorola. They don't ship their smartphones with all kinds of crap that you just don't need. The one thing that Motorola does include are Motorola related apps. Like they've got this right here, which is Motorola notifications, which I personally don't really use. I don't know if anyone really uses this, but uh, it's there if you really want to use Motorola's own apps and stuff like that. You can do that. It's not necessary. It's not that necessary, but you can do it if this is the kind of thing that you're into for customization or whatever. This is the Motorola E40, so mine came with slightly less options for customization out of the box. I know that Motorola G phones come with a wide variety of different settings and options to enhance the Motorola launcher ever so slightly more, so you can do that. But that's literally all that Motorola ships with their smartphones. And apart from that, they don't really come up with all that much extra garbage that you just don't need on your phone. Also, did I mention that these things are cheap? Like, when I got this, it was like 130, 140 euros or something like that. And, if I'm going to buy a smartphone, that's quite literally the best price that I could possibly get a smartphone from. It's a brand that I trust, makes really good smartphones, and it's also just in general a really good smartphone. Sure, there's a couple of compromises to be made with cheap smartphones. Instead of having a glass back, this is just pure plastic. I'm not sure if you can hear that, but yeah, that is plastic right there. It's not that fast. It's not that powerful. So, like I said, you're not going to play any games on here, but I don't really want to play games on my smartphone anyway, so that doesn't really affect me that much. But even though it's not going to be that particularly powerful, I mean, I can multitask pretty quickly. I can switch between all of my different apps relatively quickly. I can just scroll through all of this stuff, and it doesn't load all that quickly. It will take a little bit of time to load everything, but it's still not all that slower than when I used my iPhone. It's still just kind of comparable to the speed that I had on my iPhone 8 when I was using that. So I haven't really come to miss a faster smartphone all that much, or I haven't really come to miss all that much RAM for my phone. I didn't really need all that much stuff, and the average user doesn't really need all of that much stuff. The average user doesn't need all of the crap that smartphone manufacturers pack their phones with. And quite frankly, I just kind of think that smartphones in general, especially from the really big brands and especially from brands like Samsung, are just a little bit much. I don't think that it's really worth it to get any of those kinds of smartphones unless you're serious about what you're doing, unless you're someone who wants to get into content creation, or if you want to do serious photography or whatever with your phone. You can do that with a lot of these flagship devices, but unless you're going to do anything like that, why would you spend over $800 or even $1,200 on a smartphone that has processing power that you're never going to fully utilize? Why not just buy a cheaper phone that may not be all that powerful, but will still last you pretty damn long and will still do everything that you need a smartphone to do incredibly well? And as a small bonus, for the price that I paid for the smartphone, I also got some really silly but fun little features like this. I mean, that's just the coolest thing in the world, right? Just having a flashlight work like this on a smartphone. You can't do that on your Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra, now can you? That's just weird flex, but okay. So that was my stance on on smartphones, price, and things like that. I just wanted to share my story about this a little bit. I'm personally really happy with Motorola and with what they came up with this particular smartphone. And if I ever had to upgrade, if I ever had to buy a new smartphone, I would happily get another Motorola. For the reasons that I just mentioned. I think that this is just a really cool little thing, and yeah, I think that it's really important for anyone who wants to get into smartphones or anyone who is looking for a smartphone to also um, keep in mind what kind of stuff they're going to be doing with their smartphone. If you have an idea of what you want to do with your smartphone or what you actually use your smartphone for, then that's the moment where I can say, yeah, that's when you should probably consider what smartphone you should get. And my personal recommendation is don't overspend on smartphones. Just buy a smartphone that fits your use case best. That's how I got to this guy, and that's how I got to Motorola, who I will very happily buy another smartphone from again. Anyway, that's been it for today. I hope you all are having a wonderful rest of your day, and we will see each other, hopefully, in the next one. I'm Koen from PhoenixStarYT. Thank you for watching. See you next time.